Hey everybody, I'm here in my shop. I'm continuing to work on my camper. I've done a bunch of short different videos, and in these videos we'll be talking about some pros and cons, the components I'm using, the tools I'm using to make this camper with, and some other information about installation of the installation, some joint work. Uh, so I hope you find them helpful. Leave a comment, and I look forward to continuing this build with you and learning something as we go. Hey, I was wanting to share some of the problems I've had with my build so far. Some of the bigger problems are where my joints go in place. Also where I'm setting my sections together. Well, one of the biggest ones is my living section with my storage section. These 2x2s don't really give enough space to do all you need to do. If I had to do it over again, I'd either double or triple rail it or just use a 2x4. And you lay it flat. That way you have a place for your spacing to bracing to sit in the middle, and you end up with a little bit left over that your interior boards can connect to. You don't have to, but I think it would have just been a lot easier doing it. If not, you have to cut your blocks like I'm doing. Nail your block to the side that you want to go into. That way when you put your interior plywood or sheathing on the inside, you got something to nail into. So that is one thing that I would, if I could, I'd do over, or I'd do better planning when I'm framing up. Hey, I got an interior wall that's going to be here. Where do I need to put these braces at? Where do I need to put these blocks at so I can nail them in properly? Another thing that you really want to think about is your joints. Where you're joining your wood together here, you really have to think about how you're going to do it. I was using pocket screws to do this, but if you have 1, 2, 3 boards coming together in the same spot, it's kind of hard to pocket screw these things into place, because one board is going to end up with a ton of pocket screws in it, or the screws are going to hit each other and you can't do that. So give a lot of thought to that. I ended up using nails and construction adhesive and bracing in some places where I wasn't able to get the pocket screw into. So look at your joints where they're coming together, especially along the outside of your framing, where you end up having a lot of braces and stuff coming together, to ensure that you don't put so many screws into one area that actually weakens the structure overall. But so far, that's the biggest problem. Some of the biggest problems I've had. But make sure you got a good miter saw that cuts the degrees that they're supposed to cut. And other than that, it's coming together pretty good. Hey, so I figured I'd talk about material all by itself. Just be a short little video here. Material I'll be using is, for the framing, 2x2s treated. Like I said in another video, is these aren't really 2x2. They're 1 3/8 inches by 1 3/8. And I know one thing you can do if you want to, if you have a table saw, you can cut these out of 2x4s and save a little bit of money. If I had to do it over again, that's probably what I would do. I would just buy 2x4s and cut down the 2x4s to the size that I want to use and use those. For joining, I used pocket screws, low root, and also every joint gets a good dose of adhesive and maybe a nail or two depending on where it's at. For my interior walls, I went ahead and went with a 1/4 inch plywood. It's good and durable. I got this at Lowe's. It's called Revolution Ply, and it's by Patriot. I like it for one thing, is on each side is a wood grain, and as you can see, one side is like a light brown tan wood grain. On the other side is a reddish wood grain. So you get a kind of a choice of what you want for your own aesthetic pleasing. So that's that. Insulation, I went ahead and went with a EPS foam with a radiant barrier sheathing on it. One thing about a radiant barrier sheathing is that it needs an air gap between the exterior surface and the radiant barrier. If your exterior surface comes in contact with the radiant barrier, it's of no use. This right here should be around a R5 insulation. It should be R6, But the problem is that we're using a 1x3 framing and a 1-inch foam. So I'm only going to get about a 3/8 inch air gap. So my R value is not going to be as great as it should. So we've talked about our insulation, we've talked about our framing, we talked about our plywood on the inside. I am going to use an ACM, which is a aluminum composite material on the outside. It's very rigid, it's very good, and if you look on YouTube, you can see a lot of people are using that. So that's it for our components we're using so far. Other than at the bottom, I am using a 3/8 inch sheet of plywood for the bottom foundation. I am going to use poor man's fiberglass to seal in the bottom of my camper, but that'll be on another video. But that's where I'm at. The electrical components that I'm going to use inside the camper. First off, I'd like to talk about the lighting. There's a lot of different options out there. But I decided I'm going to go with 12-volt lighting. I'm going to go as much 12-volt as possible. I'm going to try to do everything as 12-volt so I don't have to have an inverter in my build. So the lighting wise, I went with a small canister LED 12-volt light. It's nice because it comes with a 6-foot lead already with it. It also comes with this nice little junction box for plugging them all in, so you can have a central power source if you want to. And that's really nice. So these things work pretty well. They got the little clips on the back. You just have to bore a hole in your wood, pop them through there, pop your clips through on the back of it, and you end up with a flush mounted light, just like this. So we do this real quick without taking up too much time. You end up with a flush mounted light just like this right here, which is going to look really good on the inside of the camper, and it gives off plenty of light. So these are really nice lights. They're easy to wire up, easy to connect. For turning the lights off and on, I only wanted to turn off certain lights, turn them off and on. So I got these little 12-volt toggle switches, or rocker switches, off of Amazon, 10 of them for like $6. And I spliced them into the power lead on the lights so I can trip them on and off as I want. So I have one switch to run the two in the front where your head is, and then I have another switch to work the lights over the shelving on the inside. And once that gets done, I'll show it to you. That's pretty neat. Also, for your lighting on the exterior, because if you're building a camper, you need lights on the outside. I ended up with one of these 12-volt LED RV exterior lights. They're waterproof. They're pretty inexpensive. I got 2 of these to go on my camper. One over the door on the outside, one over the other side. I'm having a window on the other side there, and one over it. I'm thinking about maybe getting a third because I thought about doing some other stuff, putting lighting in other places. But also you need a good fuse box. I got this fuse box off of eBay. It's a 12 slot fuse box. Has a good heavy duty bus bar on the inside. But what I also like about it, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, I'm not going to bother trying to open it, but there are lights on the inside. So if there are any problems, you'll see it right here if you got a busted fuse or something like that. You can also get nice little switch boxes like this that you can put inside of your camper and work it. I'm going to have one in the storage area for running anything back there, charging stuff, but I'm also have one on the interior, not with all the switches, just with a cigarette lighter plug, a USB charger, and a voltage display readout, which will really help out when you know your battery is getting dead. Speaking of a dead battery, I am going to use some solar charging on the camper. I'll mount it up here on the top. I can get about 200 watts of solar panel on top of it and a solar charge controller, but that'd be a totally different thing, a different video. But another component I'd like to talk to you about is you got to have some airflow in these things. If you're like me, I get hot. I get hot, so I like to have air blowing. I've got to have that noise at night. So I ended up, this is a little bit big to get on the camera, but you can always get you a pop-up RV ventilation fan. If I had to do it over again, I would probably go with a clear top just to let some sunlight in. But this is a 4-speed ventilation fan, and I think I ended up getting this one for like 140 bucks, 129, 140 bucks. But it's going to offer a lot of ventilation and moving air. It's a 4-speed fan, and I am actually going to try to rig it up where it's reversible. You can get them reversible, but they cost a lot of money. As you can see, that's got a pretty good sized fan, and as you saw the other one, it's a pretty good sized motor inside of it also. So this works really well, and you'll be able to put it on the inside. So far, that's all the electrical components that I can talk about other than the wiring. I am using 12 gauge wire to run my main power through the system. I have on this side right here on the driver's side, there's one run of 12 gauge wire going up. On the passenger side, there's one run going up. 12 volt at a 12 gauge, I think it said it can carry 25 amps. I could be wrong over it. So if I exceed 25 amps on this, I've got too much running on it. So that is where we're at with electronics. I think that is about it for the electronic components. So let's look at the material. So let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to be using in this build, and I have been using it. And I'll start off with the caulking gun for applying my construction adhesive. I apply it liberally, but just remember, once it's dry, it's almost impossible to get that thing apart, and more than likely you'll damage whatever you are trying to break apart. So once you glue it, make sure it's what you want to glue. Get you a good quality glue gun. These are cheap. I broke one. I've been putting it, the rivets came out of the back, but it's hard to find anything good anymore with these anyway. Also, a good sharp utility knife, cause cutting the foam insulation, cutting woods, trimming stuff off, you want a good quality utility knife with good sharp blades. If you're like me, I'm up here a lot of times by myself working. Get you some easy use single hand clamps for holding things in place. They come in so handy. These right here, I found them on sale at Harbor Freight. I got these like $5 each. But also you're gonna need some bar clamps for when you're really wanting to press something together to hold it in place. Like I said, Harbor Freight, this was like $6.50, which is pretty good. Also, when you're working with wood and everything, you need a good quality driver. I got a DeWalt right here for running all the screws, boring my holes. You'll need some good bits. You'll need hole bits, but you also need regular multi-purpose bits for putting holes in and everything and doing that. You also need, for joining together, like I said, if it's just you, an air nail gun or an electric nail gun come in so handy. They save so much time. Be careful with any kind of nail gun because the brads or staples that you're using, normally the small, this shoots 18 gauge brads. They tend to fall the wood grain sometimes, and if your hand is close to where that nail is, it's a good chance that your finger is going to find a nail. So make sure you keep your hands clear. Use your hand clamps to hold things if necessary. I've nailed my clamp to the board a couple of times, so keep your hands clear. In any kind of construction, you need a good selection of carpentry tools. You need your squares to keep everything square for measuring everything. You got a big carpenter square here, and then you have a small square here. These come in so handy when you're wanting to measure stuff and keep stuff in square, keep stuff the same distance apart. It comes in really, really handy. You need a good tape measure, of course, for doing this, but also something I've watched people do, especially when it comes to the interior walls on this, and also the AC on board that's going to go on the outside, and also cutting holes out for the rear cargo door and the inside door and the window is a small router, which comes in so handy. I've never really used routers that much, hardly ever at all, but I ended up getting this in that Harbor Freight. It was inexpensive, like 50 bucks. But the bits allow me to set up a guard, run through there, cut out everything. So when I get ready to put on my AC on board, I'll be able to take this, even though it's a full sheet up here, cut down through it right here, then run around and just cut it all the way around and cut the AC on board. I won't have to use a jigsaw or anything. But you also might need a jigsaw for different items, but also a Sawzall comes in real handy. I just don't have one of those to show you right now. But that's some of the tools that I've been using for this build. Of course, I've got a miter saw, I got a table saw, and those have come in handy for using. And that's where I'm at with my tools right now. I hope this is helping people get their things together and have a good idea of everything they need for starting the process.